This is Henry Chamberlain. Thanks for joining me again here at the Comics Grinder. I'm going to be speaking with Matt MacFarland. He's a great cartoonist, and I feel like I know him because it was a really wonderful time. I was in LA, and I went over to I can't. You'll have to help me, madam. I'm blanking out the name of the comic book store, Meltdown.
Meltdown, yeah, love
Meltdown.
Meltdown.
So I want you to just jump in and tell us about that heady time when you were doing Dark Pants. You're getting into places like Meltdown. What comes to mind?
Yeah, well, really, what comes to mind is the birth of my first child, my son. So, I mean, just to go back a little bit, it was 2013, and I had graduated from grad school for art like 10 years prior, and I was making like giant sculptures, and the last sculpture I made was this like really weird animatronic almost. It was like a scarecrow with different faces on it that moved. And I was like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to do this when I'm a dad. I think that a lot of my time is gonna be devoted to parenthood. So I kind of made a decision, a practical decision, like I guess I'm just gonna devote myself to comics. Because it was something I'd already been doing, and it's something I kind of been doing all my life. And so I just thought this is a good opportunity to just focus strictly on comics. And so I had this like weird idea about this kind of phantom pair of pants. And it was, I don't know if you've read, there's a short story by Dr. Seuss called What Was I Scared Of? And I think that was the inspiration, even though I didn't know it at the time, but it's about this character that's being followed by this floating pair of green pants, like through these different landscapes. So that was kind of the kernel of the idea, the genesis, and then the idea was to kind of have these self-contained stories that would range from, like, I think the first one was 24 pages, and then the last one, issue 4, was like 80 something pages. That focus on just like one character and one character's experience with these pants that kind of operate as a catalyst for change, I guess, in the character's life, for better or for worse. Usually for better, even though it seems like maybe for worse initially.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I'm going to go ahead and jump into a share screen
Sure.
to just give folks a better sense of where you're coming from. Now, this is the latest book,
Yes.
Seasons of Gary, about your dad.
Yeah, that's a collection of stories, some lighthearted, some funny, and some maybe a little more I don't know, emotionally I don't know, resonant or gripping or something about my dad and I, because we had I think a lot of like father and son relationships can be challenging, and
Yeah,
ours was no different.
I tried to find a page that might best represent a little of everything, because there's of course, the issues going on, but also a striving towards keeping things going, keeping things together.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough because my dad passed in 2017, and I obviously had a lot of love for him, and I wanted to kind of honor him. So I started by doing these like 4-panel that were kind of comical, lighthearted, just like anecdotes, things, because he was a funny guy. He did funny things. And then I realized I had to kind of address some things that were a little more difficult, or I felt like I had to. Almost, I mean, I don't necessarily think of my art as therapeutic, but I think there is like a therapeutic component to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, this one in particular was pretty tough. And I mean, obviously the final one too, where I talk about him passing, but I knew that I was probably going to make some of my family members not so happy addressing this. And that was true. I haven't had any like falling outs or anything, but definitely had some tough discussions. Because not everybody had the same experience as I did with my dad, and not everyone thinks of my dad the same way I do. So it's, when you're dealing with real people that have other relationships, then you're gonna probably step on some toes a little bit. So that's
Yeah.
what I encountered.
Well, it's something very different and also handled in such a brilliant way. A nice, light, balanced touch, I think. And it carries over to what you've been doing in Dark Pants as far as the style goes, I think, which is great. I love your style. And this is just one example of what happens. Well, there's a main character to each story, and the character somehow stumbles into wearing these dark pants that changes their lives in unpredictable ways. But basically, it empowers the person, but it way more than they want to be or they can handle right away. Is that a good way to put it? Or
Yeah, I think so. I think you know, and even though it's like fictional stories, they're all kind of somewhat inspired by experiences that I've had. You know, specifically, I think of like breaking up with my girlfriend of 8 years in like 2000, and then like kind of having to like figure out how to live my life as a single guy again, and like just you know just like making mistakes and just trying to figure it out. And so I think a lot of you know the ideas from Dark Pants come from that time period. And then this one in particular, this is about a boy who's questioning his sexuality. It's in the 80s. It's in Silver Lake, which was a you know had a pretty thriving gay community. I think I want to say in the 40s, 50s, 60s. So I try to pick these locations that kind of relate to the story as well. And they're all neighborhoods of Los Angeles. And, you know, this was something I did actually experience as a kid. I was like, I didn't feel like I fit into the traditional kind of, you know, masculine mold, I guess, when I was a kid. And, you know, I was an artist, I was sensitive. I played sports, but I wasn't really great. You know, and I didn't know, you know, I didn't really know where to fit in. So that kind of inspired, I think, this story in a lot of ways. You know, ultimately, this character realizes that he's gay, and you know, that's not necessarily what happened with me, but I think that you know, I had no idea when I was this age where you know which direction I could have gone. So
yeah. Do you think the Dark Pants stories will be turned into a bigger book, or do you like them just being separate little items to themselves? Or?
I think I had the idea and hope that I would maybe compile them all into one volume at some point, and I still might. I think this last issue 5, is going to be the final Dark Pants issue. I think it's a good bookend. It's kind of provides a lot of the origin, I think, of the Dark Pants. And I wish I had an example. You know, I can grab the cover real quick in a minute, but I'm incorporating 3D elements. So it has paper clay. It has it's kind of part 2D, part 3D. And I don't necessarily know why I did that, but I thought it'd be a fun challenge. And it is fun, but it's also a lot more work. So that's been a real slow going endeavor. I'm about halfway through. I think it's going to be another 80 pager, but that means every page is on a wooden panel and it incorporates clay. So it's just a lot longer process.
Yeah, I've seen samples of that on your Instagram. So how do you reproduce that? I guess you take photographs of each
Yeah, I
art
mean,
piece?
that was a really that was a question I had. I didn't really know how it was going to turn out, and I still don't really. But I ended up just taking, you know, cell phone photographs with like specific lighting. I just kind of like had one, you know, like lighting from one direction. I think I just used the sunlight maybe, and I thought it turned out pretty well. Like you could at least see the 3D elements, and you know, I was okay with you being able to see like some of the pencil lines and things like that. Like I think that's part of it too. Like it's all part of the process. So for a while I was trying to like omit everything that you could see like the process based stuff. So it would just look very clean and crisp, but I kind of just ended up accepting the fact that that's kind of the beauty of it. It's flawed, and it's kind of rough in some ways.
Well, that's got to be displayed in some gallery setting. I imagine.
Yeah, that's the hope. Yeah, I hope so. I hope that you get to actually see them in person at some point, and I'd be even okay with people touching them, because I'm not precious about it.
Now here's this was a two-parter where you discuss your observations and thoughts about R. Crumb, and here's a sample page. And so I think you were inspired to create this because you teach comics.
Yeah, I started teaching a comics class for Art Center in Pasadena, and so it was college students, and I always thought I was a fan. I mean, I always liked Crumb, and especially in college, I read a lot of Crumb and just really admired him as an artist. I watched the documentary multiple times. And then like I hadn't really looked at his stuff in a while, and so I went back and revisited it. And obviously the advantage, of time and looking through the specific filter of where we are now, it felt very different to me, and I had a lot of issues with it. So it wasn't necessarily what any specific student said. It was actually just the way that I feel like I had evolved and grown over that period, and looking at it from those eyes, I guess, and having a lot of issues with it, obviously being a father and like being a father of a daughter, and so it just had a completely different impact on me. So I wanted to talk about that, but I didn't want to do it in a way that where you're sanctimonious about it, where you're not acknowledging that you are also a fallible human being that's made mistakes. So I really wanted to incorporate the ways that I had also made mistakes, and it's like that's part of being human. And like I don't necessarily think that he should be canceled or anything, or just completely erased from history, but I do think that in some ways as a creator you just have to own up to what you do and what you make, and that's part of it.
Well, as part of preparing for this interview, I watched a really great panel discussion from Mice from a couple of years back. I would highly recommend that for people if they want to try to get a better sense of the arguments being made for and against Crumb. R. Sikoriak is very eloquent, among other folks. And I was thinking, what the hell could I add to that when I talked to Matt? And this is my original thought, although I'm sure other people have said it. I think what it comes down to is, there is the argument that he is trying to get to the underbelly of America and all its raw and faulty and horrible baggage. But then there's the actual very highly offensive imagery and content, whatnot. I think what it comes down to is he's punching down. I know that's become a very overused term, but I think that's what it comes down to. It was a great experiment, quote unquote great experiment on his part. I certainly don't want to go down a rabbit hole and defend him, but I think the big mistake is he's punching down.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And I think what I came to realize is that he talks about it as this is a satire, this is parody, I don't really mean it. And it's kind of like, well, if you're perpetuating it, then in some ways you're condoning it, right? And you're supporting it. So that's kind of what I came to realize too. But yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, especially that time period, just all the fight for civil rights and everything that was happening at that time, and how this is kind of his this is how he addressed it in some ways.
Yeah, well, that's a lot to unpack. So we'll just moving right along. We'll go on to a different subject. Now, this is very interesting to me because it looks to me that it's got your humor but it's also a collaboration. Can you tell us about how you guys are collaborating? How you and Steve are collaborating?
Yeah, you know what, I kind of have to own up that Steve Crumb is not a real person.
Oh,
But
just
no,
you.
no, yeah, it's just me, and it was kind of a way to like, um, I don't know, I'm trying to like, I'm still trying to articulate why I decided to kind of adopt this alias, but I guess it was a way to like make something that kind of looked like hopefully looked like a newspaper comic, but then had this like element of subversion, where
Yeah.
it's like the punchline is maybe not quite what you'd expect it to be. Um, I don't know. Sometimes I get like self-conscious about things that I want to say or want to do, and so appropriating or adopting like another person's name or persona like helps with that sometimes. So I think that's maybe what I was doing. I wasn't really conscious of the time, but then over time I've just kind of I said like, oh, Steve Crumb is retiring, and so I'm taking over for him, and so that's kind of, so now it's just so just my name on it. But I don't know, I just like the name Steve Crumb too.
Well, that all makes sense to me. Yeah, I did pick up on the more elegant than usual punchlines going on in what would be like a mainstream comic strip. You don't expect this extra layer. Although with a lot of contemporary comic strips, there is that extra layer, which is funny
That's true.
because um,
Yeah, but I was like, I mean, I was inspired by like the classic marriage comics, I guess, like the Lockhorns and
yeah,
the other half, and like I always read them when I was a kid, and I obviously didn't really understand or get it, but they are in there somewhere, rattling around, and so it's a
yeah,
little bit of a homage to those. And I'm married, and I thought when you said collaboration you meant my wife and I, because really she she's providing at least half of the content.
yeah.
uh,
Well, yeah,
yeah, and obviously some of them are very surreal and not based in reality, but some definitely are, or some at least start that way, and they start with a premise that's definitely happened, and then I just kind of go from there. But yeah, she's very funny. She's very she can be as like um what's the word, I guess harsh as she comes off sometimes, but like she's always very, it's always like in a very straightforward and a loving and a supportive way, like it's meant to help, not necessarily to hurt feelings. And then she's just a really good writer,
oh,
and she's just like, she's much better than me with words, and like she's just she just has the right phrases and things to say, so sometimes I just take those verbatim and put them in there, because so I want to give credit to her obviously too, even though she doesn't ask for credit, and she doesn't want me to put her name on it or anything. But
well, that makes sense. I'm sure a lot of people resonate. It resonates with me, and I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people that are in a relationship.
yeah, the funny thing is, I feel like I guess I should have realized this, but I just was at San Diego Zine Fest, and I get a lot of good feedback on Instagram for Scenes of a Marriage, and I realize it's specifically like people my age or older, or that people that are married, obviously. And so with the San Diego Zine Fest, it's a much younger group, and so they were not interested at all. It's like not, they like flipped through it and put it down right away. So it's kind of an interesting, I guess it's a generational thing in some ways, or just being married and not married.
It might be, or it might just be a lot of people being dicks. I'm kidding.
I mean, that happens with the Crumb thing too. It's like I'm a Gen X. I'm a Gen X person, so like I was kind of right on the cusp where I'm familiar, but I'm not like, if I maybe was a boomer, I'd be like a little bit more kind of reverent of Crumb in some ways, but I'm not. So I can like critique him, but like millennials and I don't know what they're called, Gen Zs now, they just don't even know who he is. So that's kind of interesting. Like I had a couple come up and say like, oh, I hate Crumb, but they were talking about a band and they didn't even know who Robert Crumb was. So that was kind of interesting.
Boy, that is such a rabbit hole, because you don't want to, you can't defend him completely, and you want to try to explain, and then you can
Yeah.
get caught into it like a tar baby.
I don't even try. I just like, oh, okay. I thought you were talking about something else. Yeah.
So you also teach Mouse and Fun Home, or
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously Fun Home was like a huge influence and definitely informed my desire, I think, to make that book about my dad, More Seasons of Gary. And I want to acknowledge also the publisher, since we haven't yet, but Zines and Things is a publisher that took the risk and decided to publish that that book. And they're like a 2-person, I think they're 3-person operation now. Rebecca and Jessica, and they're based out of Portland, but they're doing some really interesting things. And thankfully they decided to publish it. They're mostly like literary zines. So yeah, definitely want to give them a plug. But also, yeah, in terms of like Mouse, when I started teaching the college class, I assigned Mouse, I assigned Fun Home, and then those were kind of the constants. And then I would have 2 other texts that I would kind of flip around or mix up. And Mouse, I've kind of stopped teaching just because it's like I don't want to have to reread that every term. It's just so dark and heavy. But I've continued to assign Fun Home just because it's just a masterpiece. And even though it is dark and it has a lot of difficult themes and content, it's just a joy to read every time because it's so well crafted. It's just a beautiful thing. So yeah, just books about dads. I'm a sucker for those. And I wanted to make my own on a very small scale, obviously.
well, I want to. I should have done this years ago, but I want to write something seriously about Mouse, and I'm not prepared to. I don't have all my thoughts lined up neatly. I feel like I have to be really precise and have something really interesting to say, because so much has been said. I would say the book is dense, and it is a little, I don't know if it's intimidating or not. I like the sensation that all the characters seem to be, well, they're wearing masks, they're wearing animal masks. And so there's a distance created, and having the father having a language difficulty that creates another barrier. So the story is kind of deep in the background a bit, which is interesting.
Yeah, that we talk about that a little bit, or we have talked about it, where it's easier to digest because of the way it's presented, but it doesn't detract, I think, from the impact and power of the story.
Oh,
So
of course,
you're getting the story, you're getting this, you're realizing this is actually happening, but then the way it's delivered is kind of with like a spoonful of sugar a little bit, so it goes down a little easier.
yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a masterpiece and probably the most I don't know, impactful graphic novel of all time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well deserved. I guess I wanted to ask you, well, let's see, let me do the books one more time.
Beautiful paper, by the way, it's that Zines and Things chose. So
Oh, yeah.
they printed it like much better than most of the books I printed myself are like printed at a print shop, and this is just like they do this in house. This is, I think, is a proof, but same paper and everything. And
Yeah, it's a beautiful presentation.
They also, I think they still send you, if you buy a book, they send you a little button.
Yeah,
So,
I got one.
Oh, good.
Yeah, well, I'd say the same thing for Dark Pants. It's a really beautiful presentation. Because when I was there at Meltdown, I was scanning all the stuff that was there, and I was struck by how intriguing the cover was to begin with, and then the feel of the book. It's a quality, it's a quality presentation. Now, for Scenes of a Marriage, this is more like your more like your traditional little zine that people used to do at a Kinko's.
Right.
I wonder if anybody still does that. I mean, I'm sure there's some hardcore. Uh, well, I don't know. There's still a odd bunch of folks, an interesting bunch of folks. I don't want to say odd, but interesting bunch of folks who still use Kinkos. But
Yeah, I mean, I go to a lot of zine fests, and I don't do that anymore, but just because for time's sake and convenience sake. But I definitely know that there are people that still do that, and I even have some students that do a lot of that stuff themselves.
well,
Yes.
I am not making fun of anyone because I
Oh no,
still do it myself. I will
yeah,
do
yeah,
it, but I have a copier at home, so that helps. Not a fancy one, but just a. And I don't. It's not like I'm doing zines all the time, but it's interesting how Kinko's really doesn't particularly welcome that as much. I mean, it's basically FedEx stuff
FedEx
going
office.
on.
I was actually working there when it did the changeover when it was bought out.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was like 2005, maybe six, and then all of a sudden it was Kinko's FedEx office, and then it was just FedEx office. So it was like, and there's something about the name Kinko's that makes it feel like more like a mom and pop shop, and obviously FedEx office not so much.
Yeah.
But it was named after the founder's hair, because it was kinky, it was curly hair, so they called him Kinko.
Wow, I never knew that.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
just did my
there's
I just did my zine self-publishing lecture for my kids, so I talk about that.
that's worthy of a zine, the history of Kinko's.
Yeah, that's true. That'd be amazing.
And then
Uh,
there's the last one that I have to show folks my troubles with Crumb.
my troubles with Crumb, inspired by My Troubles with Women, which is a story he did,
You're right.
which is I don't know, it's pretty lurid stuff.
Now the drawings in the back, those are from your son, I imagine.
Oh yeah, these I had a blank wall and I was like, I probably should put something up. So these are actually my son and daughter. They're Halloween. This is mine actually, but this is my son's, and that's my daughter's, and that's my daughter. I thought this one is pretty amazing. It's pretty spooky. Well,
Yeah.
she's 4.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I love that one. We do DIY Halloween decorations.
Oh, very good. Well, is there any parting comments you'd like to make?
Actually,
Anything
let
that
me grab this. I know this isn't good Zoom etiquette, but I'm gonna grab this cover real quick.
yeah, I can edit that if necessary.
So this is the cover for the 5th issue.
Oh my
So
goodness,
hopefully you can
wow.
see, this is the paper clay here, and then there's paper clay down here. So a lot of it's 2D. This is gouache. It's on wood panel, and then that's the paper clay. So only the cover is going to be color like this, but the rest of the pages are black and white, but they have paper clay incorporated.
I never heard of paper clay.
Yeah, I just was doing some experimenting, and I just like the paper clay because it dries light. It's just paper pulp and water, I think. Maybe something else, maybe some glue in there. And then when it dries hard like wood, so I thought it would go well on the wood panels.
You could do some portraits if you wanted. I'm just thinking of things that would be neat to do, maybe at a gallery 1988
Yeah,
or some such place.
yeah. I mean, I love doing the faces, the characters' faces with the paper clay. That's a lot of fun. I'm actually doing this. I'm not going to get it because it's in the other room, but I'm doing this like, I don't know if you remember Laughing Sal was like a carnival, animatronic carnival character that would like laugh, and I'm doing this version of her. So I'm doing this like really kind of grotesque face, like laughing, maniacal face.
I'll have to look
Out
up
of paper
Laughing
clay.
Sal.
Yeah, it's fun. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I am starting a new graphic novel, and actually I've been doing it all on my iPad.
Oh, cool.
So that's kind of a new development for me. And it's called The Future Knows, and it's not going to be finished for a long time, but I'm like 12 pages in, and It's basically like I think of it like as a cousin to Dark Pants. It has kind of the same tone in a lot of ways. It's kind of like a comic noir story. It has some like supernatural elements to it. It's basically about this woman who can predict people's death through her sense of smell. So she can like smell if they're close to death, she can smell the aromas around them when they die. And so she kind of creates this picture in her mind of that. So I guess it's like it's a little bit like the Dead Zone.
I love
that,
it.
like he can touch people, and then he can see how they're gonna, pass on.
I love it. I'm just this thrilled that things just keep developing. I think that's just going to be something that's going to keep going on in your life, because I love the combination of a fine art sensibility and a really good, strong comics craftsmanship.
Thank you. I appreciate you being so supportive, and it was really a thrill when you picked up Dark Pants and Meltdown and reached out to me. So it's I'm glad that we continue to talk and have this exchange.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Henry.